Alrighty, we are starting on chapter 6, which deals with solving for inequalities. Today we're going to go into 6.1 and 6.2, where we're going to solve inequalities by using addition and subtraction, and also using multiplication and division. Now, when it comes to graphing inequalities, what we first have to remember is being able to use um, open circles and closed circles correctly. So let's look at example 1. If I see example 1, I have x is less than 3. So the difference between an open circle and a closed circle, anytime where it's a greater than or less than sign, I have a open circle. And anytime that it's a greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, I have what is called a closed circle. And if I'm to graph x is less than 3, what I'm going to do is in this center tick, I'm going to write 3. And I'm going to write what is 1 unit larger, which is 4, and 1 unit that's smaller, which is 2. So now that I look at x is less than 3, I notice that it is a less than, so that means I have an open circle. And it's very important when you're being able to identify things that are less than 3, like, for instance, would 2 fit that bill, or would 4? The correct answer would be 2. So I'm going to shade this side of my graph. One way you can look at it is if you make sure that the variable is on the left side, and if you kind of look at this inequality, it kind of looks like an arrow. And that arrow is actually pointing to the left. So as long as you have that this variable is on the left-hand side, we can determine which side we want our graph to be shaded. Like if we look at number 2, for instance, we have x is greater than or equal to -1. So I'm going to put -1 here in the center, and then one that's smaller, which is -2, and another one that's and 1 unit larger, which is 0. So I have a greater than or equal to sign, so that means that I have a closed circle. And again, my variable is on the left-hand side of the inequality. And if I look, see that arrow again I was talking about? That arrow is pointing, looks like it's pointing to the right-hand side. So that means that I'm going to shade the right-hand side of my graph. If you don't see that, you can plug in the numbers that I've given you, see if does 0 hold true, which it does, or does -2 hold true, which it does not. You can do it that way. Either way are ways that you can identify which way you shade the graph. So let's solve some inequalities using addition and subtraction, and then graph our solutions. Now, this is no different than looking at it as x minus 9 is equal to 3. You do the exact same thing like it was solving for x, like if it was x minus 9 equals 3. So we're going to add 9 to both sides, which that cancels, which means that x is less than or equal to 12. So now I've solved for my inequality. Now I get to graph it. So now I have 12 and one less, which is 11, and one greater, which is 13. I see that it's a less than or equal to sign, so that means that I'm going to have a closed circle. And the side I'm going to shade is I'm going to shade the left-hand side, because it looks like my arrow is pointing to the left since my variable is on the left-hand side. And if you didn't see that, you can plug in x in for 11 or 12 and see which one holds true. Let's try B. We got P minus 9.2 is less than a negative 5. So same thing, I'm gonna add 9.2 to both sides. That cancels, and negative 5 plus 9.2 equals a positive 4.2. So here we got less than, and I have P. So here, I'm just going to put down 4.2, and I'm just going to put 5.2, and I'm going to put 3.2. If you wanted to put 3 and 5, that's fine as well. I'm just making sure that you can identify how to draw the graph once you find the solution. So I'm going to have a an open circle because it's a less than and not a less than or equal to. Then since I have my variable on the left-hand side, I'm going to now notice that my arrow is pointing to the left. So that means I'm going to shade it on my left-hand side. Let's try C. Let me extend this a little bit. Let me try. There we go. Okay, so now I have 9 is greater than or equal to x plus 7. So I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides, which gives me 2 is greater than x. Now what I talked about before is I want to make sure that my variable's on the left-hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch them around, put x, and then I'm going to, because the my inequality's opening towards the 2, I'm going to do the same with my flip. So all I did was I flipped the inequality, and I also made sure that my variable is on the left-hand side. So I got 2, I got 3, and I have 1. I notice that it's a less than or equal to, so I'm going to, it is a closed circle, not an open one. And my arrow is pointing to my left, so I'm going to be shading it to my left. And that is how we solve equations using addition and subtraction. All right. Now that we solved inequalities by using addition and subtraction, the next step is to use multiplication and division. Now there is one one weird rule that you have to take in effect when you work with inequalities that involve negative numbers for multiplication and division. It says if you multiply or divide an inequality by a negative number, you must change the direction of the inequality. When during the examples, I will show you what that looks like, and hopefully you have a better understanding once we do the examples. So we're doing the exact same things as we were doing for addition and subtraction. We're solving the inequality and then graphing the solution, but now we're just solving it by using multiplication or division. So here we have a is x over 3 is greater than 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by 3. This cancels, which gives me x is greater than 24. So I have 24, like 25, and 23. So I have a open circle because it's not a less than or equal to. And my arrow is pointing towards the right-hand side, so I'm going to shade the right side of my graph. Now, let's see here. Now we have b is m over 8 is less than or equal to negative 2. So again, now we're going to multiply both sides by 8. And we got m is less than or equal to negative 16. Now, remember what I talked about here. It says the weird rule states that if you multiply or divide by an inequality by a negative number, you must change the direction of the inequality. But here we multiplied by 8, a positive number. Just because that we have a negative number in the problem doesn't mean we automatically change the direction of the inequality. It only happens when we multiply or divide by the number that's attached to the variable. So here again, we're going to got negative 16, and larger is negative 15, and we have negative 17 here. It is less than or equal to, so it is a closed circle, and the arrow is pointing to our left, so we are going to highlight the graph like so. And here is here's an example of where the weird rule applies. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 6, and here we have this cancels, which gives me n, but because I divided by a negative number, I'm dividing by a negative 6, I'm going to change the sign. See, it was less than before, it is now greater than now. So 24 divided by negative 6, this gives me a negative 4. So I have negative 4, and this is negative 3, this will be negative 5, this will be an open circle, and our shading will be on the right hand side. Let's see, let me see if I can get some more room here. There we go. And the last one, D, here is they want us to solve for S, so we're going to divide by negative 12, and so we got S right here, but because we divided by a negative number, we're going to flip the inequality, and that gives us a negative 5. But what I would like to do is I'd like to keep the variables on the left-hand side. So I'm going to go S, and it's got the caret stick away from it. And so we're going to have, instead of 5 is greater than or equal to S, I'm going to have S is less than or equal to negative 5. So again, this is a closed circle because of the less than or equal to, that's negative 5. This would be negative 4, and this is negative 6, and it is pointing towards the right hand side, so we are going to shade this object. And that is section 1 and section 2 of chapter 6, solving inequalities by both using addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. Hope this helps. Until next time.